Um, all right, I'm going to talk about building these 5 structures. Railroads seem to need a lot of small utility buildings. These are a few images I collected off the internet, and there are just a lot of interesting buildings around. I think maybe this yellow one, I believe I might have photographed myself in Tacoma. I'm not certain about that, but I think so. I kind of got turned on to the potential of building small or modeling small buildings by this RMC article a few years ago from Bob Bennett. This happened to be a Boston and Maine shed, and I thought it was just really cute. So I built this model showing these photographs. Here it is on the way it's positioned on my layout. Since then, Bill Banta has introduced a kit, and this model is available as a kit. But I scratch built it, but I'm not going to really talk about that tonight because I don't have any photographs of the building process. In preliminary, let me just mention that I prefer planning and building over operating. You know, sometimes it's really kind of embarrassing, frankly, that I consider myself a model railroader, but I hardly ever operate my trains. I just like building things. I have an 11 by 14 layout. It's ON30 and a lot of structure, of course, because I like building structures. But it's important to note that 1/4" scale is really good for scratch building, and I'm sure that some of the things I might show you would be impractical in smaller scales, and I apologize for that, but that's just the way the world works. I mean, like even wire, 20 thousandths wire is pretty small wire, but that's a full inch in diameter in O scale. And so in HO, it's about 2 inches in diameter. And just that kind of thing makes it easier in O scale. The era of my railroad is 1940, and I view that as a period when everything was maintained but worn. And so I try to weather all my buildings and all my rolling stock and make it seem like it's been used, not necessarily worn out, but used. And of course, I like to experiment with materials and techniques, and that's kind of what I'm doing tonight to show you some things I've tried. I'm going to describe these 5 small projects that each use different methods and materials, and there's nothing here that's really step by step. You're not going to go away with a plan or a kit to build something, but it's just enough detail to provide ideas and some tips about things that I have found to work. And I hope you'll be encouraged to try scratch building. The first 3 projects are based on a simple technique, a substructure of Gator Foam. And I don't know how many of you, probably most of you by now, have at least some exposure to Gator Foam, but it's a kind of an industrial grade or an artist grade foam core. It has a 64th inch wood fiber veneer on each side rather than paper, and it's a very dense foam. And so it provides a material that's nominally 3/16 inch panel. I say nominally because I don't believe my micrometer doesn't say it's quite 3/16 of an inch, but it is strong, lightweight, and warp resistant. And you can cut it with a knife or saw, and it's a great material for structural substructures. This is just an example of one building that I've worked on in the last few years. The first structure I'd like to describe is this yard office. It was inspired a little bit, it's freelance, but it was inspired by this 1956 article by Paul Larson. Those of you who are my age may remember Paul Larson was a long-term editor of Model Railroader magazine and very influential in the 50s and I think into the 60s. Anyway, he was kind of a mentor to me. I never met him, but I just learned a lot from his thinking about model railroading. So using that as a starting point, I established some dimensions on Turbocad. I'm a fan of CAD, computer-assisted design programs, and Turbocad was easy for me to learn. I had a difficulty with some others. That's kind of a different issue, but I recommend them if you have the patience. And for this particular model, I was going to do board and batten siding where the boards are just paper. And I had done these couple of earlier experiments, this little outhouse, and some of the siding on this building were paper that had been lined, then colored, and board battens applied to it, and worked pretty well. I used a method for assembling the walls on this project that I don't know what the name is. I call it the cut segment method. It's very common among styrene modelers where the openings for windows and doors are created by cutting by assembling parts that fit around those openings rather than by cutting out the openings from a single sheet. And I had a lot of scrap bits of Gator foam, and so that's what I did. These angles on these are scrap pieces, and the angles will be cut later, so just disregard those angles. But here's a example of assembling the end of this yard office with a door opening. And this is one of the sides that had a window in it. Here I've backed the windows with a fairly heavy construction paper, simply to block any view into the interior. So I wasn't intending any interior detail or any lighting. And so I didn't want any mysterious shadows or other images coming through the windows or the door. And furthermore, this extra paper across those joints I made when I was using that so-called cut segment method provide some strength for the assembly. Then I had these, I had this paper that I had printed lines on 12-inch centers, 12-inch scale centers, just ordinary computer paper. And then I outlined the sides. You can see some sketch of the outlines and ends. And then I dirty the marked areas. I treated this just pretty much like I would wood. If I were going to build something out of wood, I first dirty it by just kind of either graying it with some kind of wash or maybe Pastels or chalk or something, but just to make it look a little bit dirty so that if it shows through the finish, it's not bare wood. And then I painted the sides, in quotes, of course, with Pastels. And the color I use here is red iron oxide. It's pretty close to, I mean, it's not a bad caboose, or I mean, boxcar red. It's not a bad color. These are what Pastels look like. I know you've heard of Pastels, but you may not have used them. They come in these little round containers that are about 2 inches in diameter. They're kind of like women's makeup or something. They're chalk, but they're pastel, but they're pasted together. Or they're kind of glued together, and then they're typically applied with some kind of sponge. This happens to be this sponge shape is one of their Pastels products. So I then after painting these sides, I cut them out and glued them onto the Gator Foam Box. Then I cut out the door and window openings and started applying the battens. This shows that process in process. The battens were 1x2 pre-colored wood strips and 1x4 corner trim. And I am a heavy user of Aleene's tacky glue, and these syringes. The hint for that combination of tools was provided in a rags to riches kit I built years ago, and it's very useful. And you can see it's nice to have an occasional broken batten and so forth. Here, the window and door, in this case, I often build my own windows and doors, but in this case, they were Grant Line castings that I had in my scrap box, and they were first sprayed with Rust-Oleum camouflage sand, which is a very nice kind of almost raw wood color. So it's a good place to start. And then I dirtied them with pan pastels. This raw umber extra dark, by the way, is a very dark brown color. It's almost like soot, but it's got enough brown in it so it looks like wood rather than just black paint. And then the color that I used on the actual red color is permanent red extra dark, which is a little bit redder than the red oxide colors that I recommended earlier for the paper. The doorknob is called a bridal lace pin I found at Joann's Fabrics. A pin head is almost exactly the dimensions, a diameter that you would want for a doorknob in O scale. And I put it on brass colored paper for a backing. And in this case, I kind of screwed up the application and got some gouges around it and some leftover glue, just some discoloration that looks enough like this door has been jimmied to let me explain it that way. I don't know whether a art yard office has ever had a jimmied door lock or not, but that's what I'm pretending. And then I glazed these windows with slide cover glass. Just a word about slide cover glazing. You can get slide cover glass from Clover House. Their version comes in these rather long pieces, and I've put it on a typical O scale window here, so you can see about what size would be the maximum opening you could cover. You can't do bay window, or you can't do big windows in a commercial retail store, but most individual windows you can cover with this kind of glass. Or on the internet, you can easily find a lot of slides in a size that is about this much. It's a little less than half the size of the Clover House slides, and they're really cheap. Anyway, to use this stuff, you need a diamond scribe and a straight edge. And I found, although it's certainly not a perfect system because I have the same kind of breakage that anybody does, but I scribe lightly once in each direction, lightly but firmly, and then snap with hobby pliers. And some part of the time you get a window that fits the opening you wanted. But working with glass is tricky. but it does give you a surface that looks, provides realistic reflections and some other advantages. I then install it with PSA, and I've been using this now for 5 or 10 years on any kind of glazing, no matter what the glazing is. This PSA is marvelous stuff. It's kind of like contact cement. It dries clear. You put it on, it looks white, like white glue. And then in just a few minutes, it dries clear. And the advantage is it stays sticky, but it doesn't squeeze out. So if I were going to put a glass in the back of this window casting, I would put the liquid PSA around the perimeter with a pinhead or a piece of wire, and let it dry a little bit until it turns clear, and then drop the glazing in place, whether it's plastic or glass, and I don't get any squeeze out. Now, people tell me that canopy glue that model airplane people use, military people use, does the same thing. I don't know. I haven't used that, but I just stumbled across this PSA and I'm very happy with it. Now, I had a removable roof from another project. Actually, it's a project I'm going to talk about at the end of this talk today, that was quite a nice roof with individual shingles and skylights, but I never was happy with the way it fit the other project, and so I thought it would be good to try to use it on this yard office, and it was about the right size, not quite, but close. Anyway, it had a lot of interior detail, a prototypically constructed rafter system and so forth. But I thought I could remove all that and trim it down so it would fit on the current project. So this is kit bashing without the kit, I guess. And so I was able to get all those rafters removed without destroying the roof. And part of the reason for that is because I used Aleene's tacky glue when I put those rafters in there. And one of the great things about Aleene's is that you can remove it. I mean, there are still some traces, but they won't be visible in the model I'm talking about. And then I had to trim down the width of the halves, but the length was about right. And I added a ridge support in the yard office, and put the roofs on, and then trimmed them across the top with just 1x6 ridge trim. Then I had to add rafter tails, and this is a plug for the Ultimation manual sander. I have a 9-inch electric sander that I've been using for 15 years, and I'm really like it. But this is a pretty great tool that Ultimation has come up with, and you can repeat cuts using this spring-loaded arm with a micrometer adjustment on it. I found for very small pieces like the rafter tails, you need to, and it has an adjustable angle, but for very small pieces like the rafter tails, I needed some kind of carriage, a jig to hold the small pieces so they didn't fall down the cracks and that sort of thing. And so that's what I've done here. This is the jig, and here the raw piece of rafter material is in it, and here I've ground off the angle, and here I'm installing those rafter tails. There's really, frankly, no need to go to that kind of effort for something like rafter tails, but I'm kind of a compulsive modeler. And then I added a Grant Line smokestack and put on a foundation that's just a 1/8 inch piece, a piece of 1/8 inch masonite, painted gray on the edges. And the guy wires are brass wire, and they're terminated at this styrene plate with nut bowl washer castings. One thing I'm not too proud of, as you can see in this photo, that the brass wire got bent in the process of installation and isn't really stretched like a tire wire should be.
Hey, Ron, let me interrupt you a second. Up to the top of your screen, since you're host, do you see people wanting to join the meeting?
Yeah.
Click on them and let them in.
Oh, now do I hit the X?
No, it should be the top of your screen. It says so-and-so wants to join the meeting, just says let them in.
Well, all it says is view or, oh, I see. Okay, I can admit them separately.
Yeah, admit them.
There you go.
Since you're the host right now. Thanks.
I'll try to keep an eye on that because I noticed it before and I just hit the X, so I probably turned somebody off. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Thanks.
Okay, the coal bin I built a little differently than I normally would. Usually I would just probably make up just take a bunch of 1x4s and glue them together, or stain them first, but then glue them together and then cut them and make a box and then add the corner post. But this time for some reason I decided to do it in the reverse. I made the corner posts from 2x4 segments, and then I added the planking like you might if you were actually building such a coal box. And then I put in a plywood bottom, and these pieces, this piece here and this piece, are just braces attaching the plywood bottom to the sides. I added, these hinges are just paper hinges. Grant Line used to make some very nice hinges. San Juan Models is reissuing a lot of the Grant Line castings. I don't know whether they've been reissued the hinges or not. Frankly, I haven't looked into that. So I just used paper hinges here. And then I propped the door open and added coal. And this is the result. These tailings here that look like they never were painted have since been exposed. I'm kind of embarrassed about that photo. But the second model I'd like to talk about is a storage shed, which was a real interesting model to work on, but unfortunately I didn't take a lot of photographs, and that of course is a lesson for scratch builders. You should take a lot of photographs and you should keep a diary so you can remember later how you did something. But anyway, it was a Gator Foam Box. The window and door openings, in this case, I cut through the outer wood laminate layer and through the foam, but left the inner wood laminate layer. So I didn't use that cut segment method to assemble a box, and I didn't cut all the way through. Instead, I just cut through to the back surface of the Gator Foam. Then I wrapped with 3-foot wide tar paper. I think there were 3 widths of tar paper around this body, and it was just black construction paper. The nailer strips are 1x2 and the corner strips are 1x4. The door and window were built in place with strip wood, and then I added the 2x8 rafters and these filler boards front and back. And then I put it on a foundation of 8x10 beams. I think there are 5 beams across there. Incidentally, all the strip wood is pre-weathered and stained with thinned hunter line. I really like their Cordovan brown. It's a primarily faded black color, but it has enough brown in it to make it to relate it to wood. And I thin it with 2/3 alcohol so that so I don't get too much color. And it makes the stain last a long time. The roof, this is an interesting technique that some of you might find useful, regardless of your scale. The roof here is just tissue paper, like Kleenex, laid over the roof and then sprayed with a rattle can of flat black, and then weathered with Pastels. I've used this technique on passenger cars and several different rooftops, and I like it. Takes practice, but it's a very good technique.
Ron, see if there's somebody else in the waiting room up at the top. You can let them
Oh
in.
yeah, you're right. I'm sorry, I missed him. Oh, and I X'd him. Ooh, is there anything I can do about that? I hit the X instead of the admit.
No, it'll just have to pop up again.
Okay. Sorry about that. This cart is not a scratch built cart, and it was an interesting kit from Train Troll that does mostly boat and sea-going related models, but they show up at train shows. And I found this cart a few years ago and intended to use it somewhere in the yard. And so I decided the yard is the area where this storage shed I'm working on was going to be placed. And so I decided to do this, put a lean-to on the storage shed as the home for this cart. So I began a lean-to with creating this, creating this rear frame right on the side of the building. And then this photo also shows some of the nail holes in the tar paper, and here I did use Grant line hinges instead of paper hinges on the door. And this padlock I was pretty pleased with was fabricated from just a little tiny, the smallest piece of styrene that I could grasp in my tweezers and some wire made a padlock.
Check that entry box, waiting room again, would you, Ron?
Yeah, now I got them back. I think this is the same people that were here earlier. Yeah, thank you. Okay, let's see. Now I gotta get rid of something here. I need to figure out how to back up. No. Okay, there we go. Sorry. The leg assembly was kind of tricky because there was nothing to support it very well while I was attaching it to the building. And so the procedure I settled on was to make this front leg assembly, get it well braced with the corner braces and stuff, so it was fairly rigid. Then stand it up and support it so it was exactly perpendicular. And then add these long side pieces and these angle braces, and the angles are extra long. They're longer than they're going to be in the end, but it just seemed easier to make it that way. So here's what I had, and then I put in. Oh, sorry, I'm pointing with my finger. Nobody can see that. So I had these angles, but it remained to actually make the tie of the legs, outer legs to the main structure. And so I then glued and clamped these angle braces to the sides, to the edge rafters. And once that glue joint was dry, then I just clipped off those angle braces, and I had a fairly secure piece. The flexibility of Aleene's tacky glue, you'd think I was an Aleen salesman. I'm not really, but I do like the stuff. And it's not only removable, like I showed in an earlier situation, but it's flexible. And that was very helpful in this case, where things had to be bended and poked a little bit to keep them in place. So then I added the remaining rafters and these furring strips, and put on the roof, which is corrugated paper. Now in O scale, I know Simpson makes such roofing material with corrugated paper. And I believe Stony Creek also has a similar product. I don't know what's available in other scales, although I'm not sure scale is very important in the case of this corrugated roofing. And anyway, I like the paper stuff. It works pretty well. So I spray the paper with Rust-Oleum primer and then weather it with Pastels and glue it onto cut it up and glue it onto the roof there. And here you can note some rusting detail I've added to the nail heads, and some weathering at the bottom of the door. And this is the final model. The next one I want to talk about a little bit is the pump house. This was an experiment in individual bricks. I don't know the number of the individual bricks, but these are all individual bricks on this model. I had done one previous experiment with individual bricks using styrene. The pump house for this water tower was just a little wood block with styrene sheet laminated to it. And then I chopped up a bunch of bricks out of styrene strips and spaced those bricks by eye horizontally and separated them vertically by courses of styrene strip that were slightly narrower, so that there would be a gap there that could be filled with mortar. So I painted them red, filled the mortar lines with water putty, and this was the result. And I was reasonably happy with that, although I used a pretty long dimension for the bricks. I've always wished they were shorter. So anyway, I want to try it with the individual wood bricks. There was a company in business for a while, a few years ago, called Monster Model Works, that did laser cut sheets of wood bricks, and they were highly touted. I never worked with them, but they were really well respected. And in fact, I think they're getting back into business now. But I wanted to try wood because I like to work with wood. And so I did a little experiment with wood. I cut up a bunch of bricks with with the chopper, and I separated the courses with a strip of really thin styrene. And I thought I could remove it the way the ends show here. I had intended that once the glue dried, I'd pull that styrene strip out and put it in another course. But that didn't work very well. So I decided that it was best to just leave the styrene strip glued in place. And this was the final result of the test. I'd sprayed the bricks with Rust-Oleum claret wine, it's called. I thought it was a pretty good brick color. So for this pump house, I built a foam box with glue blocks in the corners, and I found when I was actually laying the bricks that this exposed foam on some of the edges is a problem. So next time I would use a different joint instead of this butt joint that leaves an exposure of foam, bare foam. I think you could just cover that with tape and probably get by, or put a corner post. Whoops. Put a corner post in there, or miter it, or make a rabbet cut there. In any case, I would do that corner joint differently so that I didn't have the foam. The foam is just not quite smooth enough to accept brick. Scale bricks are pretty small, even an O scale. And so that was a problem. So I started applying the bricks row by row, and I completely finished the side before I turned the structure over and started on another side, so that I was always working on a flat surface. And to do the first few rows, I needed to have something to back it up against. This just shows an angle block. Could have been up against the wall or anything. And then I went back after the fact, after I had done 2 adjoining walls, and finished the corners by sticking in the last bricks across the corner. And this slide shows me working around the doorway opening. And then I painted the result and applied Durham's water putty, which is my go-to stuff for mortar. And this is the result. Then I made a strip wood door, and the roof is just plywood with sandpaper strips on it for tar paper. And I added these brand line castings, or they're resin castings of box, electrical box and meter, and a roof vent. You can see this is just a block of wood with a corner of styrene angle on each corner, and a piece of styrene across the top, and then rusted up good. And the tar around it is a tube acrylic, Mars Black, I think I used, but out of a tube, applied with a toothpick probably. So now the last 2 projects are based on prototypical board by board construction. One was an open storage shed, and the other a speeder shed. This is the open storage shed in its nearly finished form. I did the framing for this, for both of these buildings, with stick-built walls, and I used this styrene tray. It's just a 6x6 piece of 40 thousandths styrene with a ridge around the edge, so that the corner is square. So I can make wood joints in it with wood glue that doesn't stick very well to styrene. So I can glue things together and then later pry them out without breaking them up. And these are the spacers. They give me 16-inch centered studs, and double studs at the corners, which is prototypical, like this corner here, which is prototypical construction. So you can see me here just adding studs, and this is the final result for one of the end walls. The next step in this case was to, there'd be a variety of ways I could have done this. I could have built made the floor first and then build up the walls from the floor. But in this case, I built the walls first, glued them together, and then started adding the floor. So here you can see I'm adding a 2x8 flooring. And here I've added a front beam, and here the rafters. The beam is a 2x8, double 2x8, just like prototype practice. And I have angle braces here, 1x4 angle braces, and the rafters are 2x6 rafters. I think all of these are reasonable prototypical dimensions. This is looking at the bottom of the model where I use 12x12 timbers as the foundation, and looking back at the roof, 1x6 nailers for the roofing. Then I sheathed the ends. One end I sheathed with corrugated iron. Again, I used paper siding and sprayed it with gray primer, and then rusted with pan pastels. And strip wood 1x10 on the other end, colored very lightly with pan pastels. And the back also is done with 1x10s. I tried to make it look a little rough. This corner is partly coincidence. I was going to put a piece of tar paper on this corner as though it was either the beginning or the end of an experiment with tar paper on this project. I decided I didn't like the looks of it, but in removing it, I was left with some scars and little bits of construction paper, and I'm quite satisfied with the effect. The roof was metal. I think it's HO actually, HO scale builders, HO scale ribbed metal, builders and scale, I believe. I've had it for years. I used to model in HO, and so I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was some of that HO scale builders and scale stuff. And it's sprayed with primer and then rusted with pan pastels. And here I've added angle bracing. And other than that, just a matter of putting in some shelves and this shelf and a wide variety of castings from my junk box. Well, it's sort of a junk box. Junk box with a literal interpretation of junk. The final model I want to talk about is a spear shed. I really always liked this spear shed. It was appeared in 2011 OM30 annual, and I knew that I was just going to build one sooner or later. When I got around to it, I drew up the plans for prototypical construction using a computer-aided design program, and I wanted a base for it so that I could hold it in different places on the layout, see what I thought, so forth. So I used a piece of plastic laminate, you know, like countertop stuff, and these indexing strips hold it in place, and then I laid code 70 rail and added ballast and some ground cover, and started on the model with a foundation of strip wood painted with some kind of gray and then weathered pretty vigorously. I planked the foundation with 1x10 strip wood and glued these rails in place with ACC, code 70 rails. Then I framed the walls with 2x4 strip wood using the same technique that I talked about earlier. And I glued the walls to the base. Colored the 1x10 sheathing in advance, first with probably with shoe dye. I'm not sure what I used on this model, shoe dye and alcohol mix, and then rubbed it with pan pastels, red oxide, extra dark. That's the basic boxcar red color that I like. And then I used 1x8 strip wood on the door and Grant line boxcar hardware for the latches and the hinges and so forth. Lower track has a styrene backing so that it could be slid back and forth, although I haven't had much need for that. The windows and the skylights were scratch built from strip styrene using jigs like I discussed a while back in the case of the mole clip station. And they were brush painted with polyscale, probably, dry brushed, and then glazed with a microscope slide. And this was the removable Rafter system that was built for this. I used this kind of jig and 2x4 construction to build this removable Rafter system. And here it is in place. And then the furring strips were spaced on 6-inch centers so that there would be a 6-inch or spaced on centers so that there would be a 6-inch shingle reveal. And then I applied individual shingles that I had left over from another project. I had done another project where I used approximately 8,500 of these individual shingles on a roof, and I had some shingles left over. They were cut from a cedar plank, and 4 different widths kind of gave me the appearance of random widths like you'd get if you went to Home Depot and bought cedar shingles. And they're nominally 18 inches long, and like I said, a 6-inch reveal. The only thing that's tricky other than tedious, and not just tedious, is the bottom row needs to have some horizontal spacers that make the slope of the first row of shingles similar to the others. Beyond that, it's just a matter of picking shingles randomly from these piles of different sizes and sticking them on the roof. And this coal bin is just a block of wood with wood strips on it, deliberately made to look a little bit ragged, and paper hinges and a wooden handle. The interior details were mostly from junk box. There's quite a few of them. This stove happened to be from a Bachmann coach, and the heat shield was just sheet styrene on a wall with nut bolt washer castings attached. And of course, you put the nut bolt washer castings on before you glue the sheet styrene to the wall. And the shelving is a rusty rails casting. Don't remember where I got the calendar or the thermometer, but they were from my junk box, and all this, the other stuff is junk box. The workbench scratch built from strip wood and has some various tools laid out on it. Like so many of your interior details, frankly, the payoff is small because there just aren't very many places where you can see any of the interior details. And this workbench, for example, there's no place without taking the roof off of the model that you can see that. Anyway, this was the penultimate model, which shows the shingled roof that I subsequently decided I didn't like the fit. Actually, what happened was I got the pitch slightly different on one end than on the other, and so the roof didn't fit exactly the way I wanted it to. And so this is the roof that I cut up and used on the yard office. So I made a new roof also removable. I cut these angles from a scrap of balsa that I had, and I sprayed the plywood flat black, and then I cut corrugated roofing panels from aluminum strips. I believe these are Campbell HO strips. I wouldn't swear to it, but I think that's where they came from. They were sprayed with gray primer, but then most of them were also sprayed with dark rust, which this is a very useful formula. 1/3 roof brown, 2/3 rust gives a dark rust as a base, and it's a really good color, really good color. And I applied those aluminum strips with double-sided tape and weathered with Pastels. And this is the result. You'll notice that one of the things that can happen with glass when you do your glazing with real glass is that you can get some breakage after the fact. Well, rather than replacing this, I've convinced myself that that looks like a real piece of broken glass. And this is the way these things are sited on my layout. My layout is in a 11 by 14 room, and it's around 3 walls with a peninsula. So this dimension across the end here is about 11 feet. The MoClip station that I talked about in one of the earlier clinics is this large footprint here. And the other centerpiece on the layout is this big shingle mill. These structures, but anyway, this is to represent MoClips, and the structures that I've created are this: the open storage shed goes here, the pump house here, the yard office here, the closed storage shed here, and the speeder shed here. And this is a view of the speeder shed as it appears on my layout now. It's pretty much fully and permanently, finally installed. This is the closed storage shed, and it's also pretty much finally installed. And this view shows, here's the closed storage shed back here, but the office and the yard office and the pump house are in the proximate locations where they will be, but the vegetation and the landscaping around them, the details around them, and the connection, the plumbing connecting this pump house to this water tank are not yet in place. They're on this, by the way, is the MoClips River down here curving around. And so the pump house is taking that water for this tank from the MoClips River. And the open shed shown in these two photos is poised between a machine shop or blacksmith shop and engine house. This is the front view. And again, these two are not permanently installed. The vegetation and the details are missing, but you can get the geometry. And this is a peninsula, so you can see it from both sides. And this is the other side, which reveals the back side of that storage shed. And so that's it. Any questions, comments?
Your construction is just absolutely amazing. I watched your MoClips presentation too. It's just the way you construct your buildings is just awe. It's it just makes you, yeah, it's just amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, very nice stuff, Ron. I'm impressed with your level of detail, and your weathering is very consistent from structure to structure too. You really have conveyed the maintained but not you know, still the rugged look that you're looking for. Exactly what you said in the beginning. It's really,
Yeah.
really comes through on them. It's really
Thank
nicely
you.
done.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really important to me. I see quite a few really nice layouts. Everything looks, to my eye, like it just kind of came out of the box, and I want to avoid that if possible. But my
So
layout ends up being fairly crowded because I like to build things, and so it's a small layout with a lot of structures.
On the tar paper building, you said the nail heads, are those just holes in the tar paper that you poked in the tar paper?
Yeah.
Or did you put something to make the,
No, those are just random punches with a sharp tool, probably a dental pick, or I have an awl, a small awl that I bought years ago from Micromark, and I use it for a lot of things like that. So that may have been it. And then the those that show a little rust around the nail are probably just a little tiny dab of alcohol powder mix. I haven't had very good luck on nail holes with the rotary wheels that have cogs on them. You know, I can't think of what the right
Pounce wheel.
terminology. Yeah, I haven't had very good luck with those, and I don't bother with nail holes on most of my wood siding models, but on the tar paper, it seemed like I needed some of that detail, so I put it on there.
it's amazing.
Good looking stuff.
Yeah. Where did you find the Gator board? And do they have it?
Oh,
obviously, I do
that's a good
so
question.
that's-
I'm sorry I didn't deal with that. I got mine from Micromark,
For micro.
and theirs comes in just relatively modest size sheets. They're not quite, they're bigger than a sheet of paper. I think they might be 15 by 18 or something like that. And it's fairly expensive. I believe 3 of those sheets are maybe $15. I don't know. But you can get it at Dick Blick's. You can find it online in 4 by 8 sheets.
Yeah. I think Tapco, sells it in 4 by 8 sheets.
Yeah,
It's probably a little like more economical that way, but
I'm sure it is. But
you
even
need
though
a-
I use it quite a bit, I could never use a 4 by 8 sheet probably.
yeah. It 4 by 8 sheet would go a long way.
Yeah.
Now, Greg, you use something too to make your farm buildings too, right? Do you use the Gator board? Greg, don't talk.
You're on mute, Greg.
You're on mute.
I'm sorry. Yes. I don't use Gator board. I use foam core.
Oh, okay.
Part. And I do the when you look at the corner joint suggestions he made, I use the one with oh gosh, it's like a lap joint where you cut back the thickness on one sheet so that all you have left is the paper, and you butt up against the paper with the other form. I don't know if you can find that.
Yeah, I'll find it.
There you go. It's the rabbit joint. That's
Yeah,
the one. That's
Yeah.
the one I've used for all my foam core buildings.
I haven't found any need to do that except on the experiments with individual bricks. For strip wood, at least in O scale, if I'm covering the Gator foam or foam core with strip wood, I haven't needed to do that. But
Well, when I've done this, it's been with photocopies of the building walls in order to make a mock-up.
uh-huh,
So that way I don't have blank corners.
sure.
And it's just, it basically, you look at it and it looks like a whole building. So, but that's very different than if you're covering the whole thing with, like you said, bricks.
Right.
Cool.
I made a lot of my temporary, I used a lot of temporary mock-ups, and I made those with foam core, but I like the Gator foam better for permanent structures.
Have you used that with like lighting? Does lighting come through it? Do you like if you do an interior light?
Oh, no, I don't. I don't use it if I'm going to do an interior. If I'm going to light or detail the interior, I use some more plausibly prototypical construction. I wouldn't use this is too thick. It's, you know, it just
Light won't penetrate that either. You know, the
light won't penetrate it.
No.
But it's not. It just doesn't leave realistic window and door openings and stuff like that, if they're lighted from the interior.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'd have bulletproof walls within scale.
good for your World War II concrete bunker modeling.
Exactly.
Good.
Yeah.
No, that Gator board is really handy stuff. I've used it for I haven't really used it for structures as Ron shown in this technique, but I've used it for foundations for buildings. I've used it for just elevating, you know, sidewalks off of a street or something like that, different thicknesses. And it's really handy because you can paint over it. You can, you know, get acrylic water-based stuff on it, and it holds its shape and does not warp. So
And I failed to mention, but it does come in at least white and black. I don't know what.
Yes.
Now I've used the black primarily because I'm usually looking for. I don't want the background to be particularly visible, but white would be better for a lot of cases. And if you were going to color it directly, then of course white would be better.
They also make I think Gator, the Gator Foam company make the same people that make this make a white version that actually has a thin, it's almost like a plastic instead of a paper fiberboard, and it's the same thing, really dense and hard, and holds its shape, and is waterproof and warp proof, but it's very hard to cut with an X-Acto blade. You might get 3 or 4 cuts in your blade, you might as well toss it out. You almost need like a little mini skill saw or something, or, you know, table saw to cut that stuff in any quantity. I've tried it. All right, any other questions for Ron? Thanks very much, Ron. Good clinic.
Okay,
Enjoyed it.
Stop share, is that right?
I have to say something. Any of you who can come and see his layout, it's really getting extremely believable in the tiny little pieces, because he is adding a lot of weeds, and it's just really amazing. I'm a artist, I'll say that, but Ron is much more so than I. Come visit anytime.
We would love to have Ron on a open house tour sometime. That'd be great. The pictures he's displayed in his clinics have been fantastic, for sure.
You should be aware, she doesn't know what the hell she's talking about.
Hey, DeNozo slap.
Well, I need to
So
stop.
when I hear police sirens tonight, I know where they're going.
You did real.